Okay, it looks as though everyone has joined, or we have a good chunk of people participating in this group or video chat. So without further ado, I think we could start off the conversation. Judge Friday, did you have anything you wanted to comment on?
Well, good evening, everyone, and I want to thank everyone for participating. This is just a wonderful turnout. Welcome to the Iron Range Conversation with the Courts. This is sponsored by the Sixth Judicial District's Iron Range Equal Justice Committee and VEMA, Voices for Ethnic and Multicultural Awareness. I do just want to give kind of a little bit of background on the Committee for Equal Justice and the Equal Justice Committee on the Iron Range. In 2010, the Supreme Court authorized the formation of the Committee for Equal Justice with the stated mission to work collaboratively across the judicial branch to advance efforts to eliminate bias from court operations, promote equal justice to the court, and inspire a high level of trust and public confidence in the Minnesota judicial branch. At the same time, the Supreme Court authorized the statewide formation. It also authorized each judicial district to have an equal justice committee. And there's been one in Duluth in the 6th Judicial District since 2010. About 2017 and then in 2018, Judge Anderson was appointed to the bench, and about 6 months later, I was appointed to the bench. And in conversations definitely directed by Judge Anderson, we really felt that the Iron Range was not being served in regards to the Equal Justice Committee. It was difficult for people to get down to Duluth. It was difficult for our justice partners and members of the community to participate. And so we asked, sought, and got permission to create the Iron Range Equal Justice Committee. And one of the important things that we wanted to do and accomplish is that we wanted the committee not to just be formed with justice partners, judges, lawyers, probation. We really wanted to reach out to the community as a whole. And so we opened up membership to everyone. And I remember the first meeting that we had about, I think, 25 people that attended back when we could do things in person. And the scope and breadth of the amount of community members that we had that wanted to be involved led us to really feel that maybe this committee could make a difference in regards to some of these issues. Since that time, we've had open courthouses. We had the We Are All Criminals presentation by Emily Baxter. The pandemic, since it's only been now just around not even 3 years since we formed, the pandemic definitely threw some difficulties and some wrenches in that. But during this period of time, we recognize that there's significant issues within our community, within our state, and within our country that need conversations. And these conversations aren't always easy. Oftentimes, they're extraordinarily difficult. I would say to all 41 people that are currently, in this conversation, that this is not my preferred method by which we'd be communicating. It would be significantly more meaningful if we were all in the same room together, could all see each other, could share our experience, our successes, our strengths, our harms, those type of things in person. But the reality is that that's not the circumstances that we have. And the conversation is one that is definitely important enough to begin. And this is only the beginning of a process. This is the beginning of the conversation. It's the beginning of the discussion in our community. But it was the conversation was important enough that even though this is not the best format, is not the best forum, that it was necessary for us to do so. As you can tell by my name on the screen, I am a judge here in Virginia. And I think it is important to note that all judges have very specific canons of ethics that we have to comply with. And 3 of the very important ones is that we cannot comment on any pending case, meaning any case that's currently in the judicial system. We cannot comment on any issue or controversy that may become a pending case in the courts. And we can't comment on recent decisions that may have come from courts. And the reason that I'm throwing that out there is the members and the members of the committee and the people that are here that know me would know that I generally will answer all questions very directly and honestly. But in this forum, there may be questions that unfortunately I can't answer or Judge Sullivan can't answer because of our rules of ethics. It doesn't mean that we may not try to address the underlying issue or meaning of the question, but I do want that recognized that it's not intended as any form of disrespect, of avoidance, or anything along those lines. It is just merely the rules that all judges are required to follow, and we do hold those rules very dear to maintain as best as we can a fair and impartial judiciary. Also, this is obviously a community forum. We're going to have discussions. This is the Iron Range. We treat each other as best as possible with respect. We try to do it hopefully in all areas. I recognize that the issues, and a lot of them that we're talking about, can be very emotional, that they can be very, very personal. But I am asking that everybody does act with respect. I know to the best of my ability that Judge Sullivan will, the other panelists, that we will all be exercising that, because it really is about the underlying meaning of the conversations that it's so important that we all hear. I am very grateful that we have two fabulous moderators tonight. I am going to introduce them both. I will say that they both are members of the Equal Justice Committee. And I cannot tell you just how lucky the community is to have them here doing the work that they do. I'm first going to introduce Selma, who is a lead for Minnesota fellow working on improving mental health policies, programming, and spaces for students in the Hibbing and Chisholm school districts, as well as the community at large. I know that there's probably 99% of the people in this meeting right now that knows how important that work is here on the Iron Range. She joined the Iron Range Equal Justice Committee in October and is looking forward to continuing to create meaningful change on the range, especially for people of color. I now want to introduce Ruva, who is also a lead for Minnesota fellow, located in Hibbing, tackling the issue of childcare in the area. Once again, I don't think that I'd have to tell anybody how lucky we are to have somebody here helping to work on that issue, as it is a significant issue for the working members of our community, particularly those that are struggling, particularly during the pandemic. She joined the Equal Justice Committee as a community member in December of last year and has been involved in events hosted by VEMA since last August. So at this time, I am going to turn it over to them, and then I'm sure I will be addressing everybody with questions and the like in just a little bit. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Judge Friday, for that introduction. As you may know, my name is Ruva. I'm one of the moderators for today's event. Before we jump into the conversation, I did want to also introduce VEMA, Voices for Ethnic and Multicultural Awareness. I do know that we have two of the co-founders in today's conversation, and I wasn't sure if they also wanted to introduce themselves at this moment.
Yeah, my name is Nathan. My name is Nathaniel, co-founder of VEMA, and last year we founded this because of George Floyd, and we realized the need for people of color and BIPOC to have a voice, bring the community together, and be all inclusive.
Hi, I'm Seraphia. I'm also a co-founder and co-director of VEMA, Voices for Ethnic and Multicultural Awareness. Just to give you a little background in case you don't know, we started VEMA in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. We made a decision that the people of color here in the Iron Range are very underrepresented, and that we would take on the role of being a voice for them. So that's what we've been doing since June of last year. We also are now taking on opening a multicultural center in Chisholm. So that's the work that we've been doing. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Nathaniel and Seraphia. I did forget to mention that this session is also being recorded at the Hibbing Public Access Television Network. So if you do feel uncomfortable with your name or face being broadcasted there, you are more than welcome to turn off your camera. And as well, if you would like to change your name, you're more than welcome to do so to participant or anonymous, etc. We also do offer closed captioning for an ASL interpreter for this event. I believe Hannah Forty has been putting the links to that in the group chat if you feel the need to, if you would like to access those options as well. I did also want to mention that today is part one of the conversation. We do hope to utilize or use the input during this dialogue to hopefully improve the system for everyone involved on the Iron Range. And we do hope to have a second session coming up in the next month or so, May 11th, but please keep your eyes and ears tuned in for that specific details for that event. And if you would like to have a direct line of contact for more information, you're more than welcome to email Hannah at, I'll put her email in the link or in the chat in a little bit, but you're more than welcome to email her for specifics on that as well. And then, let's see. One way we will be moderating or utilizing the question and answer portion of this event will be through Pigeonhole. And Salma, would you like to have a little bit more explanation as to how that will be run?
Yeah, thank you, Ruva. So yeah, Judge Friday kind of mentioned a little bit about me, but my name is Salma and I will also be one of the moderators for tonight. And so basically the way that Pigeonhole works is that we really wanted this to be a safe space for people to feel comfortable asking questions without feeling like their name has to be attached to it. And so I think, yeah, Pigeonhole is a really great platform where you can submit questions anonymously and everyone can look at the questions that are being asked and people have the opportunity to vote on questions that they want or whatever question that y'all most want answered. So I will drop that in the chat, the link, and then the password for tonight's event is called conversation. And I think it's all capital. So if anyone has any issues logging on or trying to, it's pretty self-explanatory, but if anyone has any issues, just message us or message the chat and we'll keep an eye out. But yeah.
Thank you, Salma. And just to kind of wrap things up for this intro, I did want to lay down some ground rules or just points to consider. I do know that Judge Friday, he mentioned this earlier, but this is supposed to be a honest and open conversation. I know it can be a little bit intimidating and a little emotional for some points of the conversation, but we do want to be respectful for the panelists and everyone else involved. So we do ask that you try to keep your microphone on mute while people are speaking, and if you do have something to point out, you're more than welcome to use the Pigeonhole or the group chat as well. And then, let's see. Without further ado, I can give a little spiel as to who the panelists are for today's session. VEMA, Voices for Ethnic and Multicultural Awareness, they asked a few community members to share their stories during this conversation. One of the three panelists are Shauna. She is from the Boys Fort Reservation. You'll be hearing from her, as well as Jay Jackson, originally from Chicago, but moved to Virginia. and then Keith Coward, who was originally from Fort Lauderdale but moved to the Iron Range as well. And we also have, within the court system, we have a panelist, Judge Friday, as you may know him from the previous introduction earlier on, as well as Judge Sullivan, judge from Hibbing, and Mike Danks, the supervisor at the Hibbing Probation. And then we also have Mark Newich, from the Public Defender's Office. He's the manager of the Iron Range Division. And from that, we can jump into the first portion, the real meat of the conversation, have the community members speak about their stories and hear from them. And if you do have any questions, you're more than welcome to put them in the Pigeonhole conversation with the link in the chat. So if the speakers from VEMA, if anyone has, or if anyone would like to start the conversation, I'm more than willing to do so right now.
I apologize, Ruba. We were kind of having some technical difficulties. Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, I was just wondering if anyone from if Shauna, Jay, or Keith were willing to start the conversation and share their stories to the participants and can get the conversation going from there.
Okay, thanks, Ruba.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, I'm Shauna Boney from Boysport Reservation. I live in Virginia. I've been in Virginia for about 13 years now from Boysport. Moved around before that. I guess how I got involved with law enforcement, I had an altercation with an officer, and he persistently harassed me after that. So along with that harassment, I got, I think it's 7 disorderlies. I switched public defenders, just trying to get a better deal and explaining that this one officer is harassing me because of the altercation we had. And switching the prosecutor, still got this crappy deal, even with the different judges. And I was just wondering, why couldn't nobody in that whole system see that this officer was harassing me? From the officer to the other officers, to the prosecutor, to the public defenders, to the judges. It's a small community. So I presented myself in front of these people numerous times. And now how it affects me is because I'm in the healthcare system, so it takes extra long for my background checks to pass. So that holds up my income to getting a better job. Yeah, and probably after that, I gotten sober. Sober for like 10 years now. I had dyed my hair blonde. After that, never got pulled over. As soon as I dyed my hair back to being dark colored, I got pulled over 5 times. 5 times. One of those times I was on the phone. Okay. But I see people on the phone all the time. But I got pulled over those times. But yeah, I just wanted to know why things don't get caught in the justice system like that. For the same offense, for the same person, for the same officer. Why that wasn't caught. And when I ask public defenders, they just tell me to take the plea or whatever, so that they will just rush off the system. But now that stuff's on my record. So I just want to know how all that kind of stuff gets blocked along the system. All right, thanks, guys. Thank you, Sean.
Hello, I'm Jay Jackson again. What's your name, young lady? Ruben. Thank you all for having me here. Can you see? Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me? Oh, cool. Okay, now I'm just going to piggyback one time on Shauna here because that is my fiance. I noticed how they were treating her probation officer. So I went in with her one time, and the minute she walked, and I know this woman had been sober for a while. The minute she walked and sit down in her chair, that probation officer told her, "You look like you're drunk now. Have you been drinking? You look like it." So I began to speak up for her, and she threw me out. That's just one incident. Now, as far as my incident, coming from Chicago, it's been a number of times I've been pulled over for no reason, but I'm on target right here in Virginia, Minnesota. One incident, it was called Freedom, but it's Marathon now, right on that Second Avenue, Second New and 8th Street. I walk in there to get a bottle of water, and as I'm going to the back, one of the Virginia police officers ran directly back there to me and goes, "Are you hiding out up here? Do you have a warrant? What are you about to do?" Now I'm sitting there buying a bottle of water, and the clerk, she looked at me and looked at him because I knew the clerk, like, "What's the problem?" Second incident, myself and Sean, this had to be about 6 years ago. We were getting a new car, so we're walking because we always walk in the summertime. We are walking, just looking at cars. This would be a nice car, this is a nice car, and we were right near the police station. All of a sudden, the police pull over, jump out, pulling his gun out, asking us what are we doing. Now, the other officer who was with him, he kind of knew of us. He kind of had a little smile on his face. I assume he talked to the officer about the whole situation. But these type of issues right here is what kind of gets me. And if I may ask the question, this judge, about the ethics. You have ethics to go by. Do you think you need to probably change some of these ethics? Because the ethics is what's currently keeping you all from speaking up for us. I know you have the guidelines to follow, but sometimes we have to step out of the guidelines. Because the other judge, what was her name? She said she just wanted to listen. Judge Friday, is it? Sullivan. She said she just wanted to listen. Now, I'm not trying to deter nothing, but people have been listening for all these years, but ain't nothing being done. So I think it's time out for the listening and to start some action. That's just my story right there, and I want to say that. Thank you for listening to me.
Hi, how you doing? My name is Pete Coward. I got a different story. I ain't gonna lie. I've been in a lot of trouble coming up, but I'm just thinking like, the things that I've been through, it still don't give the right to police to do things that they do. Like, for instance, me and my homeboy, we was riding in a car, going to do some wrong. I'll get into that, whatever the case is. We in a stolen car. So we jump out and run when the police get behind us. Now, we go in somebody's backyard, and we in like a little garage thing that wouldn't lock. So the police come, the dogs come. They yank the door open. I already told my friend not to jump, but he jumped, and they took the dog on him. So me, I know that you shouldn't move when the dog comes. They already done told us that. So I know that from past experiences. So they bit him up. I'm sitting right next to him. They knocked patches out of him, his back, his butt, his leg, his arm. He couldn't even walk. And then they turn around after the dog bit him up, and they tried to make the dog get on me. They was like, get him. But I didn't move. So the dog never attacked me since I didn't move. But my point is, why would they do that? It don't make sense to me. Why would they try to stick a dog on me to eat me up? So, that's just one of my incidents. I had plenty of them. You know what I mean? We'll talk about when I went to jail this time. So me and one of the officers got into it, a little argument dispute. And I find out that he sent 3 dudes to me. I got stabbed in the back. He hired these dudes to come and get me because of me having a issue. And that's the way he'd get back so he wouldn't lose his job. But I find that out through other friends or so-called friends. But yeah, I got a lot of little stories to tell, you know what I mean? I don't know if I should tell half of the stories I got. But yeah, it's just that the officers, I don't think that it's right for what they're doing. And nobody's never doing no talking up about it. A lot of people get out of prison and don't say anything. Like, that was the norm down in Fort Lauderdale. But and then, like, one time they went to chase them behind you, and they tell you don't run, because if you run, we're gonna beat you to sleep. And I have been beaten up by the police, but I have friends that got teeth knocked out, jaws swollen, eyes put out, because the police had to run behind you and chase you. Even if you ain't done that, and if you run, they gonna beat you. So it's like the norm, and nobody, I don't understand how it keeps going through the system and nobody does anything about it. Even though when we get to jail, we tell them what happened. But like he said, Jay said, they just brush it under the rug. So, you know, I just want to bring that up, awareness to people out, you know, and maybe something can be done about it. I don't know. But I'm just telling my story. Maybe. Thank you.
I got another story. Excuse me. I'm Jay again, and I'm back. I give you a perfect example when I lived in Chicago. I have money in my hand. I have like I have 3 5s and 2 singles. One morning I was going to the store and I had about 5 5s, and I had about 10 singles. And I took a shortcut going to the store to buy some breakfast. And all of a sudden I was pulled over by police. I was detained for 1 hour because of the shortcut I went through, because that was an area selling drugs. So I was associated and I was assumed to be a drug dealer just because of the money I had in my pocket. This is another part of the profiling that has to stop. I mean, how can I be an upright citizen and walk the street with my head up high when I'm already I feel like I'm being profiled? The police car get behind you. I mean, you heard this. Butterflies get in my stomach. Even when I am legal, I have a driver's license, that's my car, and I have insurance. But if I see the police, tell me why butterflies get in my stomach. Because I'm sure, I don't know if anyone y'all had that issue, the person of a different color. Have you had that issue like we all have had? You know, you don't get an opportunity to speak your piece because you are dubbed as wrong anyway because of the color of your skin. And you shouldn't be where you are. Now you talk about the justice for the Iron Range. Yeah, absolutely. They're going to ask, why are you nervous off the bat? Of course I'm nervous because you're pulling me over. And I can go to jail for some reason I don't even know. The minute there's a crime happening here on the Iron Range, and if it's an African American, every African American up here is going to be profiled. Even if they go into work, they could be walking with their kids. I'll give you a perfect example how far it goes. It just don't go, it goes beyond the police department. It goes with the what do you call them guys? The Rangers, DNR. The DNR. I live across the street from Silver Lake. Me and Shauna are walking, and we noticed this DNR come from the motel behind the bushes, run all the way over to another black guy who was sitting there fishing with his grandson. Now he done drilled him on everything, but a few feet this way, there's about 6 or 7 white people fishing. He didn't go over there and say nothing to them, not one thing. And that's a classic case of profiling. So being up here, I want to be part of the change. I don't want to be part of the problem. But how could I be part of the change when I'm already dubbed as a criminal and I've done nothing? So how do we change that? We have to change that starting with these ethnics that we are governed by. Because these ethnics keep us down because it don't allow you to really speak what you want to say. I'm speaking to the judges, lawyers, and police. You cannot say, and the prosecutor, because your ethnic bound you to not speak when you see something is wrong. So if everybody else stood back and went on their ethics and wouldn't say nothing, nothing would get done. So it's time for the judges, lawyers, police, prosecutors, all of y'all to stand up and speak for us, not through just these little groups and meetings we have, because we know what's going on. You know what's going on in this country. This goes back to Rodney King. Each judge sitting on this panel, do you know the officers that come into your court? Do you know their background? Do you know their lifestyle? Because they're completely different in that uniform. When they come out of that uniform, who are they? Are they a criminal who gets the free pass? Like, you know, what about people of color? Let's see some fairness towards them for a change. You know, I mean, this has been going on for years and years and years, years and years and years. Had they not brought VEMA up and started VEMA, your connection is unstable. Where would we be at today? Where would we be with Esteban or Jeremiah? So it's time for people to start stepping out of their comfort zone like we are doing. Because by us doing what we're doing, we're taking issue because there's a lot of people don't like us up here. So it's time for, if we can step out of our comfort zone, why can't the judges, lawyers, prosecutors, and all them step out of their comfort zone and start speaking up on behalf of people of color and what's not right? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay, Shauna, and Keith, for sharing your stories and for being so vulnerable and just speaking your truth and speaking it loud and with such passion. So I want to kind of hold space for all that you guys have said because it was a lot. And I know I'm looking through Pigeonhole right now and some questions are kind of coming up in response to the things that y'all said. So I kind of want to just give space to that and kind of ask you some follow-up questions if that's okay. Does that sound okay, Jay, Shauna, and Keith? Okay, cool. I'm seeing some thumbs up. So, okay, there's a couple that I think would be pretty good to ask. So there's one, would you feel differently if there were more people in the criminal justice system and law enforcement that were people of color? Would that make you feel any different?
Honestly, it really don't make a difference because when you have power in your hands, that don't make a difference. You got power. When you got power, it's saying I got a license to do what I want to do. So I know bad black police officers. I know good white police officers. But it's just the badge itself. It's a license to do what you want to do. That's exactly what that badge says. I can do what I want to do to you, and you can't do nothing about it. The fact I have this badge. It don't matter the color of the skin. It don't matter about that. Because you got black on black crime, you got white on white crime. Crime is crime itself. And when you got that badge and stand behind it, it gives me this power to say I can do this, and you can't say nothing about it, or you can't do nothing about it. That's where it begins right there. Then ethnic and that badge. That so-called ethnic that they are trained under, that they are taught, that has to change. Until that changes, nothing will be done because we're going to be sitting up here having peace now until the world ends. Thank you.
Do you want to say something to the Shauna to answer that question? Okay. You can go ahead, Shauna.
Okay. Do any of the other panelists want to, Jay or Shauna? Okay. Okay, so okay, so there's one question that I can ask sort of in response to what you just said. What would you like to see specifically to create change on the issue of race?
What would you like to see?
Yeah, what systems would you like to see in place to address sort of instances of racism? What accountability measures should be put in place?
I don't understand why we have to sit here at this day and age and talk about race. Honestly, because a crime is a crime, but you still shouldn't focus on brown people or get them harsher sentences or just tell them to take the plea or whatever because they don't want to waste money on the judges or whatever it is, why they're forced to take the plea from the public defenders or whatever, and the judges. You know, it starts from the police, it goes right into the prosecutors, into the public defenders, into the judges. And it's all their decisions, and they could make a change. And it doesn't matter on the list.
Yeah, I'll add something to that. Something about accountability. I don't think the system itself holds each other accountable fairly. I think if you count on the system to hold itself accountable, it's not going to work. So I just think maybe if they had a different group outside of the system look into issues that are being reported and not the BCA, but and have somebody have this group look into these things when they're reported. The only thing I can think of is maybe they're not taken seriously or swept under the rug, but I don't think the system can police itself. So maybe another group of people outside of the system, some force together to, to look into these things when they're reported. I think that might help. But anyway.
Okay, I'm back again. Sorry, you started me up. I think when we start, the thing about it is, you spoke on racism. Racism exists. It's gonna exist. Okay? And when we tie it into the law enforcement, it becomes a bigger problem. Okay, so like I said, keep in mind, racism exists. Like Nate said, there needs to be because the BCA, Fraternal Order Police, Internal Affairs, we know they all work together and they're gonna look out for each other. Let's be honest about that. You need somebody else to oversee them, not somebody who's part of the police, not somebody who's part of the judicial system, period. Because they still got them ethnics on their mind and they gonna follow them ethnics. You gotta push them ethnics aside and see that individual. It's like peeling the skin off me and seeing the inside that we all are the same. Because as long as we keep the skin on the outside, we're gonna have racism. And as long as you keep, like you said, you send a police officer to school for 6 months, judge go longer than that. What's the difference? How is it that the police can do what he do and the judge do what he do, but the man in the middle, which is me, is still trapped in the middle? No matter how many times you try to revise your system or redirect it, it still affects the man in the middle, and that's me. It still has over my head. See, I got that racial profile cloud over my head. I don't care if I could walk the streets with a 3-piece suit on, looking like I'm a millionaire. But as long as the color of my skin stay like this here, I'm going to draw that attention. For one thing, I'm a black man. How did you get that money? The other thing, you're a black man, you shouldn't have that. So until we start addressing them issues of them ethnic, like you said, them ethnic, because let's face it, I was reared in a household, everything my parents taught me, I grew up on it. But as I got older, I learned I had to push some of their stuff aside because life changes. With these ethnics that y'all follow, needs to be changed. You need to look at that, re-examine that. How could we do this to get them to fit in, to understand? Well, like I said, we keep having these Zoom, these conferences, and this here and that. Where is it going to get us? Where is it going to get us? That's the question. Are we moving forward or are we moving backwards? Or are we at a standstill? Right now, we're at a standstill because nobody really wants to speak out about it. Nobody wants to say nothing because of their job. Every time I'm at a rally and a reporter asks me, can I interview you? I ask them, can I interview you? Well, I can't say things. Why can't you say things? You're standing here, you're a black man, you see what's going on, you see what's wrong. Why can't you speak out? Oh, because my job is part of the ethnic. Streets have ethnics too. Just like this young man say he's been to prison and whatnot. Okay, life stomped down on him, made him do this stuff. So he followed his ethnic from the streets. So we got street ethnic clashing with police ethnic. And some gotta give. Now you got this implosion going. So we have to change that. You all have to change that. We're standing here trying to change it. Every black man, every man of color walks the street, always trying to change his profile to fit in with society. Why can't it fit in with us? Why should we always have to bend on a knee just so you can accept me? Because of your ethnics, you won't change your ethnics. Now, till you change your ethnics, you're not going to get changed. So think about that when you lay down at night, about your ethnics that you govern yourself by, because every ethnic is not right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay, Shauna, and Keith, again for that. And I want to sort of, I want to come back to some of the things that y'all said, because I think you guys brought up really good points. To sort of kind of connect the conversation to sort of the broader picture, I want to bring in the judges right now, and we will come back to some of the things that, you know, some of the great points that Jay, Shauna, and Keith mentioned. But this question is for the judges and the members of the court. So what trainings does your office/entity have in place to better educate your staff on issues of race and racism? And what more do you think your office could do to learn more about this issue?
Well, I would just comment on a broad scale. The judicial branch obviously takes issues regarding racism very seriously, and so there is extensive judicial education that's a part of every single conference that we have. That well, maybe not every, but usually is a part of most conferences where implicit bias is a discussion, examinations. Even in the Sixth Judicial District, we have a bench retreat. One of our retreats involved extensive discussion about implicit bias and education on that. Additionally, there's broader education that is required of all judicial staff as well. I can also talk about so the judges who are here, Judge Friday and myself, are relatively new judges, new to the bench, newly appointed. I believe I'm coming up on my 3-year anniversary this July. We participate in New Judge School. We also, for the first 3 years, participate in programming as part of our annual conference called Bridging the Gap. One of those Bridging the Gap conferences is an all-day conference where one of the components talked about privileged and an examination of your own personal privilege and what that means, and I think to do soul searching about what that means for you as a judge and your decision making going forward. So I don't want to ramble, but there is quite a bit of education that is going on within the judiciary that's very extensive to address issues of bias, privilege, and to take a close examination of its impact on decision making.
And I would just add to that, because there was 2 parts to that question, and the second part was, could we do more, or there are things that we should do? And, you know, historically, the structure of judges was very cordoned off from the public. The belief is that if judges were very remote, that would give them then the appearance of being fair and impartial, because they weren't necessarily involved in their community. They didn't know the way things were happening, and they just wouldn't have that connection. Governor Dayton, when he started his appointments with his governorship, had a much different view of the judiciary, that they should be more connected to the public, that they should be more involved in their community. And, it is always a difficult balancing act. But it's one thing to learn things in regards to implicit bias, explicit bias, racism, genderism, sexism, all of those types of things in a remote classroom. But it's a different thing to be out in the community and actually engage. And that's one of the things that with the broad scope of EJC, and the reason that we're doing those things is because there is that shift. You know, and I think that that's one of the areas I know that I encourage the individuals that are on my judicial team in regards to that, to try to bridge that gap through, in quotes, kind of this book learning. You know, every judge, well, the judges, you know, throughout the state, we all live in different communities. A judge in Hennepin County is in a significantly different position than a judge in Virginia or Hibbing, just as one that might be in Polk County, which is a different type of rural area. And so getting that connection so that, you know, we can be more mindful, you know, in regards to that application, and making sure that the education and the learning and the time and effort that we put into it actually has real meaning to our community. And I really do believe that that is some of the next steps that the branch as a whole, but particularly the 6th District, really is working to, as evidenced by Duluth doing this session, us, and continuing this work. But you know, I wish that it was an issue that we could immediately flick a switch and have all of us be very skilled, knowledgeable, embedded with all of those principles as we carry forth our duties as judges or as a judicial system. But it's not like that. It's a process. And you know, from myself and from my background, not being born and raised on the Iron Range, I'm really encouraged by the strides that have been made. But if the answer is, could we do more? Or the question is, could we do more? The answer is, we always could. And we're striving towards doing more with our individual judicial teams, as courthouses, and then ultimately as a judiciary as a whole.
And I think the other thing too, that the work of the Equal Justice Committee is so important, is that it encourages these kinds of community conversations, and it's an opportunity for judges to listen to the citizens of our community and talk about the struggles that they face and the issues that they face, and an opportunity to make that connection in a way that I think is more difficult without that kind of a platform. So an event like tonight. The other things that Equal Justice Committee has done is sponsored open houses at the courthouse to invite people in at a time, not at a time of crisis, because the reality is that when many people come to the courthouse, that it is in some form of crisis, whether you're talking about a criminal matter, whether you're talking about a civil matter. There has been some kind of stressful event that has given rise to the reason that person is coming into that courthouse. And an open courthouse is an opportunity to come in and see the work that's done in the courtroom, meet with the people who are really fueling the engine of justice every day, have conversations with them in a situation that isn't laden with a crisis or other obstacles. So it's a nice opportunity for us to be able to have panel discussions. We do mock trials with younger members of our community, all kinds of things to encourage communication between the courts so that the courts are listening. And I do, I think I was mentioned earlier about that. I do think it's important that we listen to our community members and that we hear what's happening. And so we do that through the work of this committee. And that is one way that we are trying to grapple with the struggles of our community.
I can address that question as it relates to in our office. For those of you who don't know me, as Ruva said, I am Mark Mewich. I'm the managing public defender for Northern St. Louis County and Carleton County. I supervise delivery of public defender services in Hibbing, Virginia, and Carleton. We've had these conversations, by the way, in the southern part of our judicial district, which falls under my umbrella in Carleton County, especially as it relates to the Native American community, as those cases are heard right in the district court in Carleton. But in terms of our training in our office, we have 2 meetings as a district per year, and we have 1 statewide meeting. And diversity and inclusion and elimination of bias training is always a part of all of those meetings. So we're very cognizant of that, myself as the administrator in the public defender's office, and we're cognizant of that, and you can never have too much of that kind of thing. So we do have those trainings for our attorneys. We do have, throughout the district, we have about 32 public defenders, some full-time public defenders and some part-time public defenders who also have private practices, and every one of them does receive elimination of bias as well as diversity and inclusion training.
Thank you, Mark and Judge Sullivan. I want to uplift a question that VEMA asked in the chat of, just kind of a follow-up to what Mark had just said of, like, are these trainings that y'all are receiving, are they, given by, are they being led by and given by Black, Indigenous, people of color that are directly affected by these issues? And that question is open to Mark or to any of the members of the courts, if y'all want to answer that.
Well, I mean, I can recall a particularly powerful presentation that was given by a Native American woman who did a presentation about history of boarding schools that I attended at one judicial conference, and she walked us through the history of that and what it meant for her, what it meant for her family. And I mean, I found that particularly powerful. So yes, I believe that the judiciary is paying attention to that, is being thoughtful in asking who is coming in to speak with us to do those educations. So that would be just one example that was meaningful to me personally.
And I'd like to add that once again is, I mean, I've been to numerous trainings where, the training is being done by an expert in the field that happens to be a middle-aged white professor, doing a presentation on implicit bias. And I kind of agree with Shauna in the prior to that question. She basically said, because that's where education comes from. And she posed the question, how many brown people have been at their dinner table or at your dinner table, and I think that it's a valid question. And I think that it's one of those things that ends up being very important, not only to the beginning of the conversation, but ultimately to the solution. Do we work, live, and associate with each other in a way that ultimately is meaningful? And I agree with the training. And to answer your question, Shauna, is I grew up on the East Coast in a completely different circumstance than people do in northern Minnesota. My friend group was extraordinarily diverse, and so it's been a lot. In regards to Native Americans, though, here on the Iron Range, I haven't really had them at my dinner table, but have I had dinner with lots of them? Yeah, because I've been in some really difficult circumstances that they were in with me. But I do believe that the point is extraordinarily well made, and once again is, in regards to diversity and inclusion or any type of training, there's the one part that's academic, right? Where we're getting kind of, here's what the research says, here's what this says, here, our means and methods. But there does need to be a significant focus on that different type, which is having the conversation face to face around the table and breaking bread. I agree that that's where a significant part of the education should come from, which is very difficult to do at a judicial conference with 200 judges. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to find a way to do so.
Thank you, Judge Friday. That was a really, thank you for addressing the other question in the chat as well. I was gonna get to that. But I kind of, for the sake of time, want to give the community members as well. We are ending at 7:30, so I just want to give the community members space to kind of There are some really good questions in here that talk about sort of, you know, being justice involved and how that affects, you know, your future, your prospects in terms of housing, in terms of employment. And I think like having space for that is I think good for this conversation. So for Jay, Shauna, and Keith, sorry, give me 1 second. I had the question and now it's gone. Where did it go? Okay. So it's two questions, but I think it kind of addresses the same theme. Someone said, why are we making efforts to even change the system? Isn't it time to humanize people with jobs, healthcare, housing, and assistance instead of continuing to criminalize people? That's the first question. And the second that kind of, again, goes hand in hand is when you are targeted and criminally charged, how does that impact your ability to get jobs and housing?
Can you repeat that second part?
Yeah, when you are targeted and criminally charged, how does that impact your ability to get jobs and housing?
Well, it's like this. Once you've been charged as a criminal, people look at you differently. And you can go in job interviews and people, I mean, they'll act like they're listening to you, but like you say, you could feel things that's going on, and they'll always say, well, we'll get back with you later. And then somebody else will come in behind you and they'll get the job because they don't have a criminal record. It's very, very hard to get jobs once you got a criminal record. Everybody should know that. I mean, it's like, that's how it is. I don't know why, but I think everybody should have a chance to prove themselves, even if you do have a record. You know, I mean, think about it. We all should be judged equally regardless, you know, should be given a second chance. I don't see why not. Because just because you made a mistake or did something you shouldn't have did, you should always be able to come back and better yourself, but the system holds you back from that because they don't want to give you a chance. So, I mean, can I follow up on that? Can I feedback on that?
Yes, go ahead.
A few years ago, I worked with an organization called OVMG. We worked on this felony. Now, what I did learn was, and I have to be honest with you, the felons are kept like they are because the penal system is a business. The money-making business. If you gave the felons the jobs that they need, how many judges and lawyers would be out of work? How many case managers would be out of work? So you're going to destroy an economy that you don't want to destroy. Until you start looking at that, then you can see. And just one more thing you talked about, Mark Mueller's talked about, they've heard. Well, if you've heard Rodney King up until George Floyd, so it's obvious you haven't heard anything. As far as you keep talking about educating. Stop trying to educate and get out on the street and see what people need. See, education is going to keep us where we are now. That's what's holding us back now. That's exactly because the powers that be, the lawyers, the doctors, and all them, got that education. They're going to do everything they can to hold on to it, which I don't knock for that. But at the same time, it's keeping the black man from a black man can walk in the store and steal a candy bar, he's going to get charged. A white man can walk in that store and steal a candy bar, he's going to get a slap on the wrist. Plus, that candy bar is going to follow that man the rest of his life, so he cannot be a productive member of society. If everybody was productive, where would we be at today? We'd be a very happy place. But somebody has to pay the cost, and somebody has to get the cost. So once you start looking at these penal systems, that's where the racial profile comes in, because it's all about the numbers. We got to get these pieces up for this penitentiary over here, so we can get more money allocated to that penitentiary. So the powers that be can get more money allocated in their pockets. Let's be honest. That's the only way you're going to stop this.
because you don't want to see judges, lawyers, case managers, all them out of a job. What happens if everybody gets reformed and can be a productive member of society? I'm going to ask you one question. Any lawyer sitting up there, any judge sitting up there, I'm sure you went to school and you had to pay a loan for that schooling. When you pay that loan up, did they keep telling you you got to keep paying us and keep paying us and keep paying us? Well, that's what it's like for a felon. Because when you go to jail, you paid your debt. You paid that debt to society, but they want to extend that debt for a lifetime for you. That's why we're still caught up the way we are. That's why that's why there's so much racial profiling to keep them statistics and them stats up. That's the problem you got right there. Education is not the key. Let me see if I can get this right. It's called duplicitous. It wasn't not duplicitous. I had to wrote down, but it's a certain way of thinking, deficit thinking. Until you can bring yourself down on my level and think like me, then you can understand what I go through. You can understand me. But as long as you keep your education, feeding your brain this education, it's going to keep us separated. Because let's face it, every person is not going to go to college. Every person is not going to be a high school graduate. But every person has something to offer this earth. Even when he walks this earth, when he smiles and says hello, he is offering something. So you got to get all that mindset and reverse it. That 360 don't work, but that's what we're doing. And we're studying doing 360. Like I say, from Rodney King to George Floyd seemed like it was a 360. But even, now let me be honest, I'm going to straight away 1 second. Them 4 officers that beat Rodney King, they got off. Now, where's the justice in that? Is that justice? No, that's not justice. That's not justice at all. So when we decide to set them ethnics aside, then you can work more with the people. But as long as you keep them ethnics there, you're gonna hear them, but you're not gonna see them. Thank you.
Thank you guys for that. Because that was so honestly eloquent and powerful and moving, just as you guys were speaking, there were things that were coming into my head that I wanted to sort of talk about a little bit, which is a little unusual for a moderator. But I think because this is such an intimate community, or should be, the Iron Range, smaller cities, I think that it makes a lot of sense to sort of create systems of care for folks that are coming out of incarceration and folks that are coming out of being justice involved, whether that's a lengthy probation, whatever it is. And I know some organizations and some folks in different parts of Minnesota, like in the Twin Cities, for example, where I'm from and where I've spent a lot of my time, who have created excellent reentry resource guides for people coming out of incarceration, and just giving them access to different social services if they need it, different jobs that are willing to give people quote unquote second chances. I hate using the word second chances because sometimes people don't even have a proper first chance, but you get the idea. And so yeah, I think that it would be wise for something like that to be created here, right? Some sort of system of care for folks that community members can step up and kind of create this for people. I think it's worth looking into, is all I'm saying. With that, there are some questions that a lot of folks are voting on in the chat as you guys were speaking. Okay, there's one that has a lot of votes that I think would be good to ask. So criminal justice providers could go, okay. I think this question is for everybody. So whoever on the panel wants to answer it, feel free to jump in. Criminal justice providers could go to training every week. It does not mean the implicit or explicit bias will change. Then what?
That's a really difficult question. This is Judge Friday, if anyone can't see that I'm speaking. as one of our, and I can't remember whether it was Jay or another one, that racism is always going to be here, and there might be some truth to that. It's one of those things that a very wise judge a while back, a family law judge in family law case said to me, the one thing I can't do is I cannot order a personality change. And so you're right, you go to all the trainings, but if the person isn't willing to hear, isn't willing to learn, isn't willing to take action and change their behavior, all of the education in the world might not change it. But on the other side, does that mean we stop trying? Does that mean as an individual and as a human being that I stop trying to work on my shortcomings and my areas of defect? And I think the answer to that is resoundingly no. I think that we have to. And even if the statement is true by one of our VEMA speakers that racism ultimately will never go away, it could be significantly less and significantly better than it is. I don't choose to believe that. I choose to have hope that someday, the world will live as one community and it won't exist. And that we will all see each other as meaningful human beings that have worth. But the question's great because I think the only answer is it possible that does happen presently? And the answer is it probably does. And it's unfortunate. And it's unfortunate to the person that has those barriers or that blindness, that they can't see, the path to change, to improvement. But even if that is the case, that possibility exists, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be taking every effort, even if some of them may not be the best effort that we could do in a certain circumstance or situation.
I think we keep having conversations. We keep talking. I would agree that training and education is only one component. Everyone's personal backgrounds and experiences are different. I don't know somebody, I don't know, Judge Friday's background the way that I know my own background and what happened to him along the way versus what happened to me along the way. But those conversations are powerful, and we do that in a multitude of ways. And tonight is again an example of that. I'm not saying that these are the only examples, but they are certainly attempts at trying to make yourself self-aware, to recognize your privilege, recognize what explicit or implicit bias exists, and to do your best to tackle that problem with the tools that you have. And so, I certainly believe education is a component of that, but it is, and when we talk about education, there's formal education that you learn when you go to a conference, and there's education that you take from your daily life and experiences that you've had along the way as well. And so I try to be a student of the world, and I think that many people do, and to learn, listen, and have conversations as much as possible to begin to address these kinds of issues. And I don't claim to have all the answers, but I certainly want to do my very best to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem.
Thank you, Judge Sullivan, for that. And you're absolutely right. This is such a layered conversation that really can't be, we all know this, but really can't be even begin to be addressed with one event or one conversation. But the hope is that this can be something ongoing, and that we continue to build community, and we figure out, tangible ways to sort of address these things together. So thank you for that. I want to, for the sake of time, kind of semi-transition a little bit. I know that, Mike Danks is on the call, and he is, if y'all remember from the beginning, a supervisor within the probation office here on the range. And so there's a really great question that was asked about probation that I want to direct towards you, Mike. The question is, if a probationer does not have the resources to fulfill their obligations set to them by their probation officer, does the probation office sort of have systems in place to address these barriers to help people meet the conditions of their probation?
Thanks, Alma. I believe so. You know, when I started in this field 24 years ago, I guess I'm aging myself, you know, there was a big emphasis put on financial obligations to the courts. And to be honest, as probationers or probation officers, we don't even concern ourselves with financial obligations any longer. It's not anything that we're concerned about. You know, there's certain barriers that we've dealt with for years just because of our geographic location. You know, people of poverty have difficulty with transportation, and that's something that we've dealt with, you know, for years and years. And, you know, we'd like to see more public transportation, but we also recognize that there's other ways of meeting with clients, meeting their needs without being face-to-face if they can't come to our offices to meet with us. We have agents that work in the field. We have, you know, thanks to COVID, we have all become experts in this type of Zoom meeting, and we've utilized that with our clients. A lot of the programming that is required, whether that is someone that was convicted of a domestic assault, we have programming that is working on a sliding scale or provided at, you know, a much reduced rate for people based on their income. We do have, for chemical dependency treatment, which is a huge part of what we deal with, county assessors who do these assessments with the clients and provide funding for them. So I think we are working in some areas, but we always have more work to do. And, you know, we have to deal with resources being limited, and it's something that we're going to have to continue to work on as a system, as a whole.
Yeah, thank you for that. And there's a question here that says, why isn't there a prosecutor here? And we did have one on our, as like when we were planning for this event, we did have one that we reached out to, or I think a couple, but they, one of them, I believe, if I remember correctly, was ill, so could not make the event and dropped out at the last kind of minute. So yeah, we do recognize that that is sort of a gap that's missing from the conversation. So I just wanted to address that and say that, you know, for our next conversation, we will try and secure that so that that gap is filled, hopefully. So yeah, thank you to whoever asked that.
One thing I see two of my old colleagues from the faculty at Mesabi Range in Virginia, Lee Rodney and Melissa Skaya are on the call. And they may remember this about the time when we all taught together. This is what started the conversation in Virginia. In the mid-90s, I was teaching political science and criminal justice at the college in Virginia. In the mid-90s, an African-American student athlete from Milwaukee went to the Super One store on North Side about 11 o'clock at night, grocery shopping. And someone had reported that there was the manager, that he was in there to rob the joint, case the joint, steal, whatever, totally incorrect. He was in there grocery shopping, and he was met with about 6 squad cars thrown to the ground, guns drawn, the whole 9 yards. And that's what opened my eyes, and Leah and Melissa may remember this. That's what opened my eyes. I was a faculty member at the time, and basically was what the, you know what, total overreaction, inappropriate reaction by the Virginia Police Department, and that horrible thing is what started the conversation within the college community, and then it spread to the broader community in Virginia. And Leah may remember that when we had that occurring. and we had that discussion. And that's where when I first saw, I grew up in Hibbing. I'm from Hibbing. I live in Eveleth. I'm an Iron Ranger. Unlike Judge Friday, I grew up here. Still live up here, practice up here, been practicing up here for 27 years. But that's what opened my eyes to it when I saw that. And I counseled the student, helped counsel the student from going back to Milwaukee. And you could have easily, he could have said, I'm out of here. I don't want to stay here. And Coach Tom Stackpool, one of my best friends, former basketball coach at Mesabi, other faculty members, we counseled the students, said, this is not representative of the people here. We love you. We want you to stay. And Leah and Melissa may remember that. That student stuck it out, got his degree, and then transferred to Moorhead State and got a 4-year degree from there. So that's my story on how I first saw this. It was when I was a college professor and that horrible thing happened to that student. So good to see you again, Leah and Melissa, by the way. Leah's raising her hand, Selma.
Okay, I don't see that. Maybe it's just on my end, but.
Oh, you're on mute, Leah.
All right, there you go. Okay. Well, yes, I was at Mesabi at that time with Mark, and I was in charge of a diversity program that had been developed. And when we saw that was not just one incident, but many incidents of people being profiled in the community, and I went to the administration and asked the president of the college, said, how what the students were reporting to me and to people like Mark that were happening, and that I felt that if we were going to recruit people of color to come to the school, we had a responsibility to make it a hospitable place. And he said he didn't think so. He said this is a racist place, and it will be until this generation and probably the next dies off. But until that time, I am committed to letting the students know what they're coming to, an all-white community. And if they come, they need to adapt to our culture. And so the big disappointment was that here was the administration, a person in leadership who could have gone to the Chamber of Commerce, could have gone to the Rotary Club, the Elks, the Kiwanis, whatever business groups or, any kind of social groups in the community and advocated for the students, but he refused to do that. And so the students really sort of took things in their own hands and started educating people at the school and reaching out. And they brought in the NAACP. And I, by the way, lost my job. So it was very ugly. And I think there's a lot of things that still have not been done. And I think part of the missing equation is getting people in leadership positions to speak out and acknowledge that racism exists and to commit themselves to doing something about it.
Thank you all for sharing that story. Very impactful. But I did want to leave a little bit of space. I know we're reaching the end of our time here. I wanted to leave a little bit of space for the panelists to share just a very brief concluding comment on our time here. And you can start it off. I'm not sure if the speakers, the community speakers are available if they would like to say one or two quick things to conclude. Not quite sure. Seraphia, yeah.
I'm like, I just wanted to real quick address a couple of things as they were talking about that incident with that young man. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things in that, one thing that I would pose was in that situation, were any of the people in power held accountable? You know, even if it's just something to think about, if it's not something that's to be answered now. In the situation with the young man that they were just talking about, were the people in power held accountable in that situation? Also, I would like to pose the question for you to think about, what have you done since then to remedy a situation like that so that it doesn't happen again? And, you know, just the last thing to think about in that situation would be, had that young man went on to work behind a counter at a gas station, would you be so enthusiastic about what he was doing? Because, you know, it always seems to be that there's that kind of bragging that they followed that narrative, right? So, oh, he went on to get this degree and he went on to get that degree. Would it have been as impactful to you had he have done something that did not fit the narrative that makes you most comfortable, I guess? So those, I know we're running out of time, so that could just be things to think about for future. Was there anything else for you, Nathan?
Yeah. Thank everybody for coming. I appreciate it. It was awesome.
Thank you for the invitation. It was my honor and my privilege to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be a part of the evening, and really appreciate everybody who came out to start a conversation, and my hope to having many more.
And I would echo all those sentiments. I really want to thank VEMA and getting the speakers lined up. I mean, I found it very powerful. There's a lot there to begin the conversation. Once again, I'll express a little dismay of this format, but in light of the format, I still think that, I definitely heard more from, it was Ms. Bonus, Jay, and I think it was Keith. I apologize if I missed the names. To me, there's way more common ground there. There's way more. I like the energy. There was so much that Jay said that I'd love to sit down with them, because there's a lot that he said that I'm right there with them in regards. But part of the engagement and the listening is also then ultimately the response and moving forward and looking at what we can do as an Iron Range community to potentially find solutions that work for our community. I'd love to change the world and fix the world, but I'd be happy if we just made Virginia, Hibbing, Chisholm, and the whole Iron Range a better place. And I really think that energy is here, that the desire is here, and the willingness to have open, honest, and difficult conversations that may make us uncomfortable, that we hear things that we may not want to hear. If we can keep that going forward, that's the remedy to find some of those solutions and then institute action that actually results in change. And so I really hope that everyone that is joining us here tonight is willing to join us for the next one and the one that follows. And then when we get to action steps, to get up, stand up, get the feet on the pavement and to actually take action. I know that I have that willingness, and anybody that I can encourage to have that willingness, I will do so. So I'm very grateful that I got to hear those stories tonight.
I'd like to say thanks to everybody, especially Jay and Shauna and Keith. I'm not sure if it was Jay or Keith that said it, but they're exactly right. They had to step out of their comfort zones to do that, and we all need to step out of our comfort zones. None of this is easy work to do, but we have to be willing to do that. I think we all need to just realize that we all have different realities. I can't pretend that my upbringing was the same as Jay's or Keith or Shauna's, but just all of us having the ability to recognize that we have these different perspectives of what is out there and be willing to listen to them. And I think, whoever asked the question about or made the statement that we could go to go to classes every week is exactly right. And I think being able to have these conversations with Jay and Sean and Keith are more impactful for people to be able to hear, the stories and get perspective from people on how we can change. So I really thank those three for being here.
Yes, and as we're all sending over many thanks and gratitude, thank you again, the panelists that spoke. I also want to thank HPAT as well as Mesabi Tribune for broadcasting this event to the rest of the community. They did a great job and much appreciated. And I also want to reiterate that this is part one of the conversation. That the next part will be tentatively in May 11th. You can also email or get Hannah's email for the specifics on that if you would like. Other than that, there were a lot of questions that were left unanswered during this presentation or this conversation. So I believe that EJC and hopefully VEMA as well will come together and plan a part 2 of this event and maybe push for the action plans for this conversation to a third event. But we do hope to have this conversation continue on for the long term to actually produce positive change in the community. Other than that, Salma, I'm not quite sure if you have anything else to mention. If not, conclude this event. We greatly appreciate everyone who attended. The conversation was more than what I expected, and I appreciate everyone's honesty towards it. So thank you for attendees, panelists, everyone involved in this.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for your time tonight. And yeah, just like Ruva said, this is part 1 of the conversation. We hope to have many more, and we hope to have you all stick around as well. So yeah, have a great rest of your night, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.